But one of the things that, and then she's talking about obviously the move to a transition. I think she's seeking to make the contrast of 4 years ago, and the transition to, the peaceful transition from one elected official to another. But the thing that strikes me just quietly is how much she's still coming up with that stump speech about women having freedom and control over their own bodies. And really, that would seem to have been, well, we'll find out from Shawn in a moment, a fundamental misunderstanding, I would have thought, of people, that this election shouldn't have been about abortion. You might have seized it as an opportunity to say that, but surely it was about the economy. Anyhow, Professor Shawn Easley from Ohio joins us now. Shawn, about what time,
Hello.
and welcome to the show, well, at what time yesterday or your time did you think, this is not going to go the way I'd thought?
Hello.
Hello, Shawn.
Can you hear me?
Shawn can't
Hello.
hear us. Ben?
I can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me?
You can't hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes, I can.
Good. Now we've
You
established
can?
that.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Now, yesterday you were listening to this, with friends in your home at university. When were the results were first coming through? Where were you?
Yeah. I worked all day yesterday volunteering at a polling precinct. And so I didn't get back to the house here till about 9 o'clock our time in the evening. And not much was settled at that point. The expected red races were called and expected blue races were called and what have you. Nothing definitive happened until a couple hours later when, sure enough, North Carolina was the first so-called battleground state to be declared. And to be honest with you, I was so exhausted from having spent 15 hours working the polls all day that I went to bed and didn't know anything until I woke up this morning.
Oh, well.
And when I woke up this morning, it had all been resolved.
Yeah, well, there you go. Which is the way. Can I just say, we were very lucky in New Zealand. As I said, we were watching the first results come through at 3 o'clock yesterday afternoon. We were able to watch the results, and we knew who the President of the United States was by 10 o'clock last night. So, and we obviously knew how it was going prior to that too. But it was our dinner hour, so we were a bit lucky. We were rather enjoying the spectacle, obviously, but it fitted brilliantly within family viewing hours. So, so I do feel for you, because I think Trump finally got on stage at about 2 o'clock in the morning, didn't he? Maybe even after.
That sounds right. Yeah. I was asleep.
Oh, okay. All right. Listen,
not
big question.
Give the entertainment value that you need here, but
yeah. Listen, you're in Ohio, first of all, so I'm going to. Boy, did it go red!
It did. Yeah. He exceeded his last two successes here. He had about, 7 and 8% respectively in 2016 and 2020. I think the numbers now put him in at about 11%, so about a 2 or 3 point net gain in his popularity here in Ohio. Why? Because, it's the economy, stupid, as James Carville correctly said back in the early 1990s about Bill Clinton, and especially acute in the industrial states, industrial Midwest in particular. And the fueling of that economic pinch, I think, was what was most realized by the Ohio voters, and that's why they overwhelmingly supported him again.
They also flipped your senator. They got rid of a Democrat senator who'd been there for, I think, 2 terms prior. So you've got a Republican senator there now, and I see that your local state legislature is completely controlled by the Republicans as well. Why is Ohio? I always had the impression that Ohio was a swing state. No more. It's very red.
Right. The definition of a so-called bellwether is within 2% of the national popular vote, and we lost that status in 2016 when we were again about 7 points out from the national vote. It swung very red. Some things that people look at are levels of educational attainment, and with the states in the Midwest that have the lower levels of educational attainment, simply meaning the number of people in the population with college degrees. As that gets lower and lower, the state gets redder and redder. The same is true with Pennsylvania. We kind of have gone further down that real hole there in terms of the national standard, and that is reflected in our very, like you said, Republican politics. Senator Sherrod Brown, you're right, had 2 or 3 terms, was immensely popular, and the thing that made him popular was he was quite centric. He kind of appealed, in fact, to the working class. He came from an area that had a large manufacturing base, Youngstown, Ohio, which is about an hour or so east of here. And so he had kind of ridden that popularity through the last couple cycles, even though they had turned red. But this time that ultimately caught up with him, and he was overtaken by Bernie Moreno, a one-time or first-time politician in our market here.
The other thing that I became obvious to me as an outside observer, and we've got the same problem in New Zealand, was the partiality, if you like, of the mainstream media in the United States of America. It was almost impossible to go to any news media outlet in the United States of America and not get a particular slant based upon both their reporting and their opinion making. No matter where you went, it was particularly strong, I have to say, for the New York Times, which I always used to take as a pretty good newspaper, but there you go. And so what that suggests is that if I was seeking to find out genuine information from the media outlets in the United States of America, I would probably end up getting my own prejudices and biases and perceptions relayed back at me, wouldn't I? Because I'd have to choose one. Is there any neutral media in the United States of America at all?
I always tell my students to read, broadly, and if you're going to read or watch one particular channel, make sure you spend some time on the other. Although you say that the broad swath of media has a liberal bias, it's probably true of the core. But I'll remind you, of course, that the number one news network in America is Fox News, and they are ostensibly very sympathetic to the Republican point of view, and Mr. Trump in particular, even though they had some kind of on again, off again relations with him in the last at the conclusion of the last term. They're been very strongly supportive of him. Even the people that he has really offended and been really particularly volatile towards have all come on board on their particular broadcast. So if the majority of Americans are getting their news from Fox, even if the other ones are combining to present a more liberal bias, there's still a pretty even field out there. Or I could say there's a lot to choose from, and you can hear whatever you want to hear. And of course, the biggest problem with Americans is we tend to silo ourselves in an echo chamber that does reinforce beliefs that we already have. There's a big argument about how influential the media is. I would always argue that it's not very influential at all, because typically what happens is all you do is tune in material or read material, so on and so forth, that reinforces what you already believe. And so you're not changing opinions as much as you are strengthening or weakening them.
Kamala Harris herself, has she got a future, or is this it? Bye-bye, see you later. Go and do help at some soup kitchen somewhere.
I'm glad you asked, because we talked about this last time about nominees that won the nomination more than once. She theoretically didn't really win this nomination. It was largely coronated, and had she been in the open field and had they had an actual primary early last spring and what have you, it could have been a very different outcome. So that may position her slightly differently than it would a typical person that ran the whole thing, won the primary, and then went on to lose the election. Again, I cited Adlai Stevenson. Of course, the most important one I forgot to mention was Richard Nixon, who won the nomination and lost the election in '60, and then came back 8 years later and won the nomination and the election, of course, for presidency. So I don't think she's done, but I don't think she would have won the nomination if it had been an outright one in the first place. So it's hard to say whether or not she returns as a competitive presidential candidate for the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party has some other people that I know a lot of Democrats were looking to even for this cycle, that Mr. Biden had bowed out earlier. And I think their prominence, or their star, if you will, is going to rise before hers will again. But I don't think that means she's done. I just think I don't believe she's going to be the Democratic nominee, at least in the next cycle.